I relate to that because
Right.
being in the accounting business at cocktail parties, I tend to get shunned. But
All right. Hey, Matt, here's what I
hey,
got planned for today. What I want to do is compare notes, and we haven't talked about this yet, but some of our favorite things that we see in different ecom businesses that we've worked on, talked to, and just done different consulting projects for, and see if we can create a list. And I'm curious to see if we have any overlap in our list of stuff that we see as similarities across some of the greatest e-commerce businesses that we've worked on and seen. So yeah, I just want to get it started with, I got this list prepared regarding what are my top favorites that I get to see in terms of what are the most defensible, just all around holistically best businesses that I've ever seen. So to start my list off, something that I look for when I just am assessing an e-commerce business or one of the clients that we have is, as weird as it sounds, how boring is the products? I sometimes ask myself, is it boring enough? And this is a question I ask myself too when I'm assessing, for the products that we sell on Amazon and other marketplaces. We're trying to find that category fit, what might be good. Boring is something that's actually near the top of my mind. You'd be surprised. I mean, I could index some of the top businesses and clients, people I've worked with over the years, things, products, categories that do tens of millions a year, and you would never believe it unless you were literally had the numbers in front of you. Sometimes it's obscure, sometimes it's non-obvious, but I honestly think that there's some sort of correlation between the cooler and more flashy a category is, it's that much more competitive and potentially a difficult category to kind of make headwinds in and really make your mark. That is something that's in the top of my mind, usually a lot when I'm assessing different products that we sell and carry. But I mention it because some of the highest grossing, most profitable businesses that I've ever worked on sell arguably the kind of products that if you were at a dinner party or social event and people asked what you do, people's eyes would glaze over immediately when they heard what this type of product or category was. Those tend to make some of the best businesses that I've ever seen and worked on. I'm curious, I'm going to just kind of rattle off, try to get through the whole list, and I want to hear your thoughts on each of them. The next one is kind of an obvious one. I don't think this will be too controversial. A defensible IP, preferably in the form of some kind of utility patent. When it comes to Amazon, there's all sorts of horror stories, as we've all seen, of products and categories that are just rife with bad actors who are not respecting people's IP, and it can be difficult. But I do believe that Amazon doesn't want or like to get sued. And at the end of the day, if you have a utility patent and you have that IP, that's something that's defensible. That's something that eventually Amazon, whether it's initially or as fast as you would like it to, that's another thing. But that is a tool and mechanism you have to build a moat around whatever the product is and to remove people who might be trying to rip that off or unauthorized sellers and such. So I think that's kind of an obvious one, but I think it's still worth mentioning because some of the best businesses that I've seen and work on, a lot of them tend to have patented products around certain categories and niches. My third one is strong control over the supply chain. And what I mean by that is I like to see wherever it's possible, the best case scenario is if they're the manufacturer. This is rare, right? This is the Goldilocks zone of like, if a business has this, this is incredible. But another kind of similarity between some of the highest grossing businesses that we work on are they are either very close to the manufacturing in the center of the production. So they're like one step removed because it's domestic and they have a close relationship, or they themselves are the manufacturer. And that just has very obvious benefits, right? They don't get as overstocked as other people do because they're able to sort of dynamically create new products on demand. On pricing, they're extremely competitive. They're the source. So they're not having to pay someone else to make this product and give up the margin dollars that way. So there's a lot of inherent benefits that just come with that. And again, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the best businesses that I've ever seen that we've worked on in terms of revenues, in terms of profits. And I'm trying to see what they have in common. That is definitely a commonality between some of the best businesses that we work on and see. The kind of fourth one that I had on my list, Matt, is does the brand have meaningful sales channels off of Amazon? And so this is another one where we're no exception to this rule. I mean, for the products that we sell, a majority of our revenue comes from Amazon, and that's representative of e-commerce and just how big of a titan Amazon is and how much market share they control. That being said, if you don't make efforts to kind of branch off and break into new channels, I think everything should be based around how do you diversify some of those revenues and be able to protect yourself from, again, you're never going to get away from Amazon and all the revenue that it creates. It's an opportunity you can't pass on, but you need to create some effort and other channels, and that could be your own website, that could be exploring B2B relationships with retailers that might want to carry your product, really a number of things. But again, that just the synergy between selling and executing on other channels that, again, might not be as big as Amazon. They might not command as much market share as revenue, but all of that synergy, it plays off of itself, right? If you're in retailers and you're doing well on Amazon, people see the product, that helps you, right? That helps the retailer to some extent if there's some pricing protection around, if you agree to sell at a certain price and they can sell it at retail, so there's no undercutting, and vice versa at retail. If people see the items at retail and they go to buy it online, there's more eyeballs that are able to see that product or that item. So that's another commonality I see with some of the top performers in our book of clients. The last one I'll end on, Matt, is, are they in a niche where they can launch additional products? The answer to this question is almost yes, because in any product niche, if you're selling pillows, it makes sense to sell bed sheets. There's really few categories that are so niche that really doesn't make a lot of sense for. But I mention it because some categories are better poised for this than others. And so if you have a category where you're just able to have that kind of customer profile and you delivered well on a certain item and you can continue to innovate and build along that niche, that's another commonality I see with some of the top clients, highest grossing revenue, most profitable businesses we work on. But yeah, I'll cap it at 5, Matt. What are your thoughts on that list so far?
Nice. Well, I think you've hit on a lot of important ones, although I will be the first to admit that boring was not a metric that I had considered. I certainly see where you're coming from in terms of if you want to get into the supplements category, right? There's a bazillion people in that category, and it is very competitive because it is considered, I don't know, a more glamorous category. Whereas if you're selling replacement parts for a dishwasher, nobody's thinking about that. There's nothing sexy about it. But if things are breaking down and you're doing a good volume in replacement parts and there's decent margin in there, that could be a very interesting business from a business standpoint, even though at a cocktail party, nobody's going to get excited. And I relate to that because being in the accounting business at cocktail parties, I tend to get shunned, but I get it. So boring as a criteria hadn't occurred to me, but it makes a lot of sense. The patentability, definitely anything that builds a defensive moat around the business is going to be helpful. I think, and I have one of the points I'm going to bring up is adjacent to this, but maybe even stronger. Patent is good in that you can hopefully make the case that Amazon shuts down infringing listings, but I think there's lots of ways to be close enough without crossing the line that you can have still a lot of competition, even when you have a patented product that are going to eat into your margins and your sales.
Yeah, that
you wouldn't be able to knock out on the patent claim. The supply chain category, 100%. I agree. If you're the manufacturer of the product and you're selling direct to the customers, that's the best position there is, right? If you think about the typical supply chain, it starts out as a full apple, and along the way, about 8 people take a bite, right? And so if you're the last person selling to the consumer, you're down to the core and a couple of seeds, but that's all you have left to work with.
Yeah.
So if you can be the manufacturer or adjacent to the manufacturer, you have a much more control, as you said, over supply, over inventory, over margins, over quality control, all kinds of things that if you're just a piece in the middle of that chain somewhere, you're taking whatever you get and you're trying to make the most of it with pretty thin margins. I think that's definitely a benefit. And off Amazon, absolutely. I think as every year goes by, that becomes more and more important to have your own ecosystem of product availability and promotion and social influence and people talking about it and finding it various places. Relying strictly on Amazon, I think, yes, you can do it. Obviously, lots of people do. But I think as things get more and more competitive, being only on Amazon and having no external presence is going to really hurt you. It's going to hurt your ranking. It's going to hurt your visibility in the marketplace. It's going to ultimately hurt your sales and your ability to keep your prices, to not just be competing on price. And then last, absolutely, I agree. If you can sell a constellation of related products, you've diversified from a single point of failure. If you're only selling pillows and suddenly for some reason you have a problem getting pillows or you can't get them at the price it used to or whatever happens, right? You have that's it. But if you sell pillows and bed sheets and comforters and mattress pads and whatever else, you diversified your revenue. Hopefully you're selling to the same customer, multiple products, and it just makes for a stronger business. So you won't ideally want to have something that is within a constellation of products, not a single standalone product. So all of your points, I completely agree with. And from what we've seen in our successful sellers, some or all of these exist. And the more you have, I think the better off the business is. But a few I will throw out there to add to your list. One is products that offer the opportunity for recurring purchase or repeat business. It doesn't even have to be a subscribe and save specifically, but things that are consumable or run out or lend themselves to repeat purchase. Obviously, if the customer has a good experience with your brand and it met their needs, hopefully they come back and buy from you again and again. And so even there, in that case, if you had to spend more to acquire that customer than that first sale was worth, if it turns into a repeat purchase situation, then the lifetime value of that customer grows substantially and makes the whole process much more profitable for you. So items that are recurring or have the potential for recurring business versus a one-off, one-time only sale, I think have some benefit baked into them. Another one I always look at is just what's the margin in it. And a lot of this comes back to, are you the manufacturer or do you have the ability to do some kind of premium pricing for it? But all things being equal, a product with a higher profit margin just has more room to invest in marketing, to invest in, or, make up for supply chain snafus and whatever else, right? If you're running on thin margins, even if you're doing everything else, a hiccup out of your control can be the difference between a profitable batch of products and an unprofitable batch of products. The higher the margin, the more you're insulated from that, the more you can reinvest in growth in other products, the more you can take off the table and pay yourself, and the higher the business value when you go to exit. For all of those reasons, I really think, and we see from our clients, the higher margin products, to the extent possible that you can choose to go that direction, it's really a beneficial direction for the business to be in that position, to not be competing with generic products and low margins and competing on price. And then the last point I will bring up, which is along the lines of the intellectual property, the patent, is I think even more valuable in my estimation than that is to have a brand that is recognized and unassailable, right? So to give you an example, my daughter has been recently into this book series called Warrior Cats. And I don't know what it's about because I don't read the book, but presumably a bunch of martial arts cats. I don't know. But the reason I bring it up is because she wanted a hoodie. And I can find a generic black hoodie in her size for starting at $10. But if I want one with Warrior Cats on it, it's $49.95. And I have no other options. Right. I cannot get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And although it doesn't cost them any more in material or anything else, by having that brand, they can charge a premium because they're the sole source of that product. And they've built a loyal fan base who doesn't care about the price, right? If I want it, I want it. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And you can make that case with all kinds of different brands that are able to do that. Everything from Monster energy drinks, right? It's just an energy drink. Right. There's 100 energy drinks on the shelf, but if you built a loyal following around the Monster brand, you can get $2 or $3 more per can for your Monster energy drink than for the generic Monster or the generic energy drink. They've got virtually identical ingredients. Mm-hmm. And you're more immune from competition, right? So you've got pricing power and competition can come along and, we're Frankenstein energy drinks or we're Ghost energy drink. Well, yeah, but I want Monster. I want the original. I want the OG of energy drinks. So I think businesses that have a brand that put their product on another level are really powerful because they are much harder to compete with and they have the ability to do premium pricing and they have the ability to control their supply chain, even though they're not maybe making all the products by putting their brand on the products. And then they have the ability to your point, offer more products, right? Look at
Yeah.
The Star Wars brand, I mean, you can buy Star Wars anything, right? I've seen Star Wars potato peelers, right?
Yeah.
How does that but now your potato peeler is $4 more than a generic potato peeler because it has Chewbacca on it. I'm like, this is amazing. But that's IP they created literally 30, 40 years ago and have been able to expand across all these products and categories and collect essentially free money by having that power. So to me, and again, the sellers we see, the clients we have that do really well, have invested the time and effort to build a brand that speaks to their community, is identified as being desirable and being worth the premium price. And that, I think, is a superpower that any product that can develop for itself is worth having if you can do it. And it's not easy, and it's not always, even you can put the effort in, it doesn't always translate. But to the extent that you can make that happen for your products, I think that is an advantage that is almost outweighs any of the other things we've talked about in this list of now, 8 different things.
Yeah. So much of, I think, that power of brand is its ability to take something that is a commodity and pull it out of that to make it somehow command a higher price point. A potato peeler it should be a commodity. A sweater, these are things that have a very well-defined scope of utility. And where you don't want to be is in the price war of who can command because now you're in a game of manufacturing, supply chain, raw materials. You want to somehow, brands is so much about tricking the consumer, for lack of a better way to put it, into being willing to take something that arguably could be a commodity, but pay a higher price for it, and do so because of the brand. And I mean, largely you could look at a lot of e-commerce sellers and you could really draw a line kind of down the middle of who is selling widgets and who is building a brand. And they're not the same thing. Look, there are a lot of people making money online selling widgets, don't get me wrong. But to your point, if your goal is to command a higher price point that really isn't justifiable, it's not a better product, really. It's not superior materials. It's probably coming from a similar supply chain or manufacturer. And then ultimately, if your goal is to have an exit, you're going to want to be thinking about it from a brand point of view, not where can I find arbitrage in said category selling these kind of nameless products. But yeah, it's easier said than done. I love a lot of your list because as I was going through my list, I was just kind of like indexing based on what were some of the commonalities that our highest performing clients had. But I love your additions because what you're saying is actually stuff people can act on, right? To tell someone, hey, you should get a utility patent, you have to come up with something that has IP. You have to have the financial resources at the time to hire a law firm. These are things that are incredibly expensive and take time. You're saying, hey, look at a category. If you're in the launch phase, look at consumables. Look at stuff that demands or requires a repeat purchase. Think a lot about margin, right? Depending on the category, you don't have a lot of choice there, but there are things in your control when you're deciding what to sell and what you'll probably have ideas or be looking at different options that command different price points and thereby different margins based on what your costs are. And yeah, brand is, as you said, that's the most important one on the list because that's a decision that starts more or less day one. Do you make that investment early on to put your logo or whatever it is on the product? Or you just say, hey, I'll save the 50 cents or $1, whatever it is, and we'll just sell this as it is. So that's a decision and an expense that kind of needs to be made more or less day one. Those are great additions. And I think you said the most important one of all, which I had not touched on. And those are things that people can act on right away. They don't need to wait till they have a manufacturing plant and think about their comprehensive supply chain. So I think that's great. In preparing also, Matt, I know we had talked about, we want to cherry pick a piece of business advice or platitude that you hear a lot and make the case for why maybe that conventional wisdom requires more thought, more analysis. And this actually ties in with something we were talking about earlier. The one that I'm choosing to pick on today is something I hear a lot is the need for focus, right? Focus in, focus up. And again, speaking in any kind of absolutes on anything is probably, if you're committed to one direction entirely or the opposite, you're probably on the wrong path. But I do hear this kind of conventional wisdom platitude said a lot to business owners. And my case against focus, I would sum up as diversification. And this ties back to a point we were making earlier. If, I talk to a lot of business owners who are trying to figure out why revenue is stagnant to declining. And we look at their catalog and it's impressive. They've got, maybe it's a small SKU portfolio, maybe it's a medium-sized one, really isn't a big one. But we talk to the business owner and they're trying to figure out this problem about growth. And there's all sorts of contributing factors and places to start. And then you look at and see the last time they launched a product, and it was 2015 or 2016, right? And I think this advice can be taken a little bit to the extreme of, we have a problem, revenue is declining, revenue is falling. What's the answer? What do we have to do differently for this core set of what we're doing, what our product offering is, what our brand is, without thinking about the fact that, like, hey, maybe we should launch some new products. Maybe we should find a way to add an additional SKU or value add for our customer base, because we haven't done that in almost 10 years. And for some reason, it's not usually the first place people go to. And so I think that's what I'm choosing to pick on today is, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure a lot of people are too. It's easy to get excited about ideas and just start launching stuff or try to start launching stuff. And you shouldn't do that if your house isn't in order, right? If your business has fundamental processes and systems that are broken and not functional, then you have no business trying to expand, right? You need to clean up your house and fix what is broken. But if things are more or less dialed in and you've got a core set of products or product offering and you haven't really launched or innovated or done anything in a while, I think that's a problem. And I think that, and sometimes implicitly it's right there in front of people's faces that, hey, maybe we should launch some more products. Maybe we should think about another item that we can add to this kind of client profile we've developed and customer base that has clearly gotten some value out of us, because they're typically strong businesses that do millions of dollars a year. That's my cherry pick today. I'm going to make the case against focus. We won't call it lack of focus. We'll call it diversification. I think that's a nicer word for it. But that's something I hear a lot, and I choose today to say I disagree. Let's wrap it here. I think we've got a really good list of just things to look for in a business. I think the insights you gave, Matt, were very actionable for folks.